Hi, welcome back to Reading the Bible in a Year. Today is day 38, and we will be reading Exodus chapter 20, 21, 22, verse 1 through 15. Let's get started. Exodus chapter 20, the 10 Commandments. Then Bob. That's a great start. Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Do not have other gods besides me. Do not make an idol for yourself, whether in the shape of anything in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters under the earth. Do not bow and worship to them, and do not serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, bringing the consequences of the father's iniquity on the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. Do not misuse the name of the Lord your God, because the Lord will not leave anyone unpunished who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You are to labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You must not do any work. You, your son or daughter, your male or female servant, your livestock, or the resident alien who is within your city gates. For the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything in them in 6 days. Then he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and declared it holy. Honor your father and your mother so that you may have a long life in the land and that the Lord is giving you. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not give false testimony against your neighbor. Do not covet your neighbor's house. Do not covet your neighbor's wife, his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. The people's reaction. All the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the sound of the ram's horn, and the mountain surrounded by smoke. When the people saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. You speak to us and we will listen, they said to Moses. But don't let God speak to us or we will die. Moses responded to the people, Don't be afraid, for God has come to test you, so that you will fear him and will not sin. And the people remained standing at a distance as Moses approached the total darkness where God was. Moses receives additional laws. Then the Lord told Moses, This is what you are to say to the Israelites. You have seen that I have spoken to you from heaven. Do not make gods of silver to rival me. Do not make gods of gold for yourselves. Make an earthen altar for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your flocks and herds. I will come to you and bless you in every place where because my name is to be remembered. If you make a stone altar for me, do not build it out of cut stones. If you use your chisel on it, you will defile it. Do not go up to my altar on steps, so that your nakedness is not exposed on it. Exodus 21. These are the ordinances that you are to set before them. Laws about slaves. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he is to serve for 6 years. Then in the 7th, he is to leave as a free man without paying anything. If he arrives alone, he is to leave alone. If he arrives with a wife, his wife is to leave with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children belong to her master, and the man must leave alone. But if the slave declares, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I do not want to leave as a free man, his master is to bring him to the judges, and then bring him to the door or doorpost. His master will pierce his ear with an awl, and he will serve his master for life. When a man sells his daughter as a concubine, she is not to leave as the male slaves do. If she is displeasing to her master who chose her for himself, then he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners because he has acted treacherously toward her. Or if he chooses her for his son, he must deal with her according to the customary treatment of daughters. If he takes an additional wife, he must not reduce the food, clothing, or marital rights for the first wife. And if he does not do these 3 things for her, she may leave free of charge, without any payment. Laws about personal injury. Whoever strikes a person so that he dies must be put to death. But if he did not intend any harm, and yet God allowed it to happen, I will appoint a place for you where he may flee. If a person schemes and willfully acts against his neighbor to murder him, you must take him from my altar to be put to death. Whoever strikes his father or his mother must be put to death. Whoever kidnaps a person must be put to death, whether he sells him or the person is found in his possession. Whoever curses his father or his mother must be put to death. When men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or his fist, and the injured man does not die but is confined to bed, if he can later get up and walk around outside leaning on his staff, then the one who struck him will be exempt from punishment. Nevertheless, he must pay for his lost work time and provide for his complete recovery. When a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod and the slave dies under his abuse, the owner must be punished. However, if the slave can stand up after a day or 2, the owner should not be punished because he is his owner's property. When men get in a fight and hit a pregnant woman so that her children are born prematurely but there is no injury, the one who hit her must be fined as the woman's husband demands from him, and he must pay according to judicial assessment. If there is an injury, then you must give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, bruise for bruise, wound for wound. When a man strikes the eye of his male or female slave and destroys it, he must let the slave go free in compensation for his eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his male or female slave, he must let the slave go free in compensation for his tooth. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox must be stoned, and its meat may not be eaten, but the ox's owner is innocent. However, if the ox was in the habit of goring, and its owner has been warned yet does not restrain it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox must be stoned, and its owner must also be put to death. If instead a ransom is demanded of him, he can pay a redemption price for his life and the full amount demanded from him. If it gores a son or a daughter, he is to be dealt with according to the same law. If the ox gores a male or female slave, he must give 30 shekels of silver to the slave's master, and the ox must be stoned. When a man uncovers a pit or digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit must give compensation. He must pay to its owner, but the dead animal will become his. When a man's ox injures his neighbor's ox and it dies, they must sell the live ox and divide its proceeds. They must also divide the dead animal. If, however, it is known that the ox was in the habit of goring, yet its owner has not restrained it, he must compensate fully ox for ox. The dead animal will become his. Exodus chapter 22. When a man steals an ox or a sheep and butchers it or sells it, he must repay 5 cattle for the ox or 4 sheep for the sheep. If a thief is caught in the act of breaking in and he is beaten to death, no one is guilty of bloodshed. But if this happens after sunrise, the householder is guilty of bloodshed. A thief must make full restitution. If he is unable, he is to be sold because of his theft. If what was stolen, whether ox, donkey, or sheep, is actually found alive in his possession, he must repay double. Laws about crop protection. When a man lets a field or vineyard be grazed in and then allows his animals to go and graze in someone else's field, he must repay with the best of his own field or vineyard. When a fire gets out of control, spreads to thorn bushes and consumes stacks of cut grain, standing grain, or a field, the one who started the fire must make full restitution for what was burned. Laws about personal property. When a man gives his neighbor valuables or goods to keep, but they are stolen from that person's house, the thief, if caught, must repay double. If the thief is not caught, the owner of the house must present himself to the judges to determine whether or not he has taken his neighbor's property. In any case of wrongdoing involving an ox, a donkey, a sheep, a garment, or anything else lost, and someone claims that's mine, the case between the two parties is to come before the judges. The one the judges condemn must repay double to his neighbor. When a man gives his neighbor a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to care for, but it dies, is injured, or is stolen, while no one is watching, there must be an oath before the Lord between the two of them to determine whether or not he has taken his neighbor's property. Its owner must accept the oath, and the other man does not have to make restitution. But if in fact the animal was stolen from his custody, he must make restitution to his owner. If it was actually torn apart by a wild animal, he is to bring it as evidence. He does not have to make restitution for the torn carcass. When a man borrows an animal from his neighbor and it is injured or dies while its owner is not there with it, the man must make full restitution. If its owner is there with it, the man does not have to make restitution. If it was rented, the loss is covered by its rental price. Wow, that was day 38. And it's so interesting that the laws that came after the 10 Commandments that we received, they became so specific, and it's so interesting that there's words like condemnation and punishment and things like that. But there was like a verse that we read. I don't remember the exact number right now, and for timing purposes, I'm just gonna paraphrase it right now. Or it said that if someone else decides to come into the court and basically pay the fine for someone else and redeem someone else, that they can do that. And then the person, whoever is convicted of whatever breaking the law they did, whichever that was, I think it was related to an ox, that example, but if someone else can pay for that redemption, then that person is free and they are redeemed. And it's such a really fascinating thing to notice that, because as we know in the New Testament, and we've already read from the prophets, but we'll go that further in the Bible, but then through the prophets we hear that God is sending someone to redeem us all from our transgressions, because we have all transgressed in the sight of God. And it's really interesting that there was already this understanding that someone else could come for redemption through this language. Because an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth is not what Jesus came to teach. He came to teach us to pray for our enemies and to pray for people who persecute us and hurt us. But it's really fascinating that there's kind of like an evolution of our awareness of an understanding of God, and that He is all powerful, and because He is truthful, since we have transgressed and we've lived in sin, it's like like the Israelites, it's impossible for them to go near the mountain. It's too powerful, it's too bright, it's the truth. And whoever didn't consecrate themselves would be burned instantly because it's so much truth and light. And so it's really fascinating that he sent his son to us to teach us about the love and the truth of who he is, to redeem us back to our original natural state, which is of love. Anyways, I'm trying to look for ways to connect with the Old Testament, because there's certain parts that, obviously, certain things that are said or people used to do back then that I wouldn't want to be doing in my life and wouldn't want to apply today. But it's interesting to kind of connect the dots and try to understand it from a bigger picture perspective, because if I just read the verses as is, I remember the first times I would read the Bible, it would be one of the reasons I didn't want to actually read the text, is because I was like, some parts are like violent and really intense. So yeah, this is just a little bit of Rebecca's interpretation, but you can leave it for what it is. I'm not saying that this is by all means what you need to take on. I'm just sharing my perspective and what I'm taking in from today's reading. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.